So we will divide this class in, as usual, four sections. First, we'll start with a quiz. Then I will give a few announcements, and we will finish the discussion of the previous class. Then I will answer a few questions, and finally, we will have a activity, a discussion about genetic screening. So let's start with with the first item, that is to take a quiz. So remember, you can take this quiz and then move here and try to answer some practice questions that, as usually, I will not grade them. I just want to know. I just want that you practice some of the questions that they might be in the test. Um, Now let's move to some of the announcements. So, the announcements. First, remember we have a final exam, and it will be on in this date. Some of you will be online, some of you will be in person. And important, if you want to retake this, it's not mandatory. Some of you might want to improve your grade. It will be at the same time that the exam, so as usually you finish relatively fast in the test. Here you have extra time to do that. In the following days, I will post things related to your final exam, so you have more information about the different topics and how many questions there will be in both test two and also in the final exam. Regarding the book review, here you have on Moodle. Many of you have seen the information. Remember, it has to be uploaded here, and this is the deadline. And if you have any question, remember that there is um there was a link that you can watch. I think 30 people have watched it. uh, but if you have any more doubts, just let me know and I will answer any of your questions. Now we're going to finish the discussion about cloning. So we saw
Like when we were first introduced to them,
of a person that
this one like
clones
jumped up,
his
barked at
dog,
me, and like looked me
if
like
you
dead in the
remember.
eye.
And so we have multiple questions about that and about how ethical is that and would you do it or not? Do you think that humans should be allowed to be cloned? And do you think that it could be some exceptions? So, and here I just want to talk about more than is this right or this is wrong or is that that we think very clearly or try to see what is the problem. Do you think that the problem is the fact that cloning is happening, or do you think that and what about if we do with other techniques? Is that technique, or is the fact that we are continuing the life like that we're continuing the life of another organism? And so, for example, why I ask you these things? Because there are so every couple years, every couple decades, there is a new controversy related to science. So when I started studying biology, this was a huge controversy. This GMO, genetically modified organisms, and at that time, and there is a still, although there is a still controversy, if you talk to anybody, uh, independent if you consider that this is right or not, if you live in North America, you possibly are eating food that is genetically modified. And and in my case, in my own experience, uh, I have been working with glowing animals. Yeah, so what if we did is long time ago we took uh, hydras. Yeah, these marine animals that are fluorescent, and decades ago they start putting it in different organisms. So, for example, I have all my movies, and some of the people at CMU, some of the students are working with fruit flies that are fluorescent. And in the labs, we show some of those flies. And some of my friends, so for example, have worked with a fish, or ones have worked with different with mice, and they actually, some of my friends were so happy to see them that they actually took them as pets. So it's just a controversy. Is this ethical to have modified organisms? Is it ethical to clone them? What is the problem? Is the techniques? We should not do anything with nature. And as usually, the question is, what is the what is actually the underlying problem? Because if we with the genetic modified organisms, uh, actually we got used to it, and maybe are we going to get used to it to this, and it is worthwhile that we get used to it, is worthwhile that we do it very often, and in which circumstances we should approve this. So, and another thing that is very interesting is, um, imagine that we have this dog, they create this, there is this mutation of a dog that it looked like a panda. Of course, this is not a real panda, it's just they stain the legs and the eyes with paint, and they said we are going to give clones of this. Yeah, we cannot. It only happened once in. It's the only animal that we have. Would you like to have this panda? Yeah, because to have this coloration is very difficult. That generally you find that in patches, but this one that look like a panda, this generate a question: would you get a dog like this one? And if you are a fan of Pokemon, what about if they modify these organisms to get something like this? Yeah. So because this is what is going to determine if cloning or genetically modified organisms are going to prevail now. And remember that we have been studying that even with artificial selection, we have been doing genetic changes in dogs for centuries. Now we are just doing it faster. So what is the line that we find that something is ethical or not? And finally, uh, this question that is really difficult about cloning humans, and it was very interesting to talk about with some of you about this topic. And when we think about this, we think about, as I said before, uh, about movies or about these things. But for example, one of the applications of cloning, as some people have said, is what about when you need to donate an organ that many people in the world died because there is not the organ that you need. And what about if we can use this as a tool, cloning? Yeah, we will have less problems to find this shortage of organs for some people, and we will also destroy the black market that is also famous. That in some countries you can find there's a black market of organs. What about if we create this? We clone just bodies to do that, and of course there is this create a lot of controversies, and some people say, what about if we use a different technique? So I'm going to show you that yes, this is a part of the debate. Could we clone our organs to be used in a transplant? And there is a very interesting field that is moving really fast, that is working on that, and I'm going to show you a video about it. This is not exactly cloning; is an alternative to cloning organs. That is just bioprinting them.
Donors are difficult to find, and what we want to see is trying to be less dependent on organ donations. So with 3D printing, the capabilities to be able to generate organs which are acceptable to the recipient are much larger. But we're not there yet. We are moving towards that direction. 3D printing in healthcare could be defined with two different applications. One is from the model's perspective, basically models that you can literally print into a particular shape and then adjust to the patient. We have certain examples where we see that already starting. So the dental industry sees the printing of crowns and invisible type of braces that could be printed for the customer in the office. And the reason why this is a method that is fairly economical, especially for the patient, is that you do a scanning of the impressions of the patient and then are able to modify in an electronic file what you would like those final state of the teeth to be. And then you're able to replicate multiples of them in one platform. And then there are less visits to the dentist. In using 3D printing for prosthetics, they help from the perspective of being customized and fitted to the stump where the former limb was located, and they're made out of off-the-shelf polymers, so they're not too expensive. From that perspective, it's also cost minimizing in comparison to traditional prosthetics. For example, in the use in pediatrics, the patients are in constant growth, and the cost associated with that fitting would be lower. It also will be a rapid turnaround in comparison with traditional fitting of prosthetics. The second application is bioprinting. The tissue engineering market in relation to 3D printing or bioprinting is expected to have approximately 32% growth in the next few years. The main difference associated with a bioprinting operation and a 3D printing operation is the use of bioink, which is artificial or it could be natural materials, and the mixture of those with cells. And when we say artificial, think about polymers, plastics, and natural could be lactic acid proteins. From the perspective of drug testing, bioprinting could offer flexibility in terms of cost efficiency. And what I mean by cost efficiency is animal testing. Animal testing is fairly costly and does not replicate what the interactions of the drugs will be with the human. So having a platform with 3D printing where we're able to replicate what the human tissue would be provide us, one, repeatability for the drug testing, two, lesser costs associated with the drug testing. A lot of studies start with mice or rats, but then to be able to prove that it's truly efficient, you have to go with larger animals and you have to take care of them during the process of drug testing, and it's costly. And with bioprinting, it does provide you a platform to be able to do drug testing without the use of animals.
Okay, so that was a pretty cool video that talk about that. And remember, every time that you hear somebody selling something, you have to be very careful. So something that she said that is not true is that if we use bioprinting, we will not use any more animals, yeah, model organisms for experiments, that is completely wrong. Yeah, they are trying to sell this idea of bioprinting that is very useful. However, what we have found in history is that in the beginning we have one model organisms and we said, oh, we just need one. Then we start getting more and we found that they complement each other, and then we start using growing tissues cells in a petri dish, and we say, okay, if we grow cells in a petri dish, now we are never going to use model organisms. And actually, each system will complement each other. Yeah, and a bioprinting can complement this the work of model organisms, but it's not going to replace it because it's just they talk about that we have human tissues. We already have tried to do that with human tissues, but the problem is that you have only the interaction of few tissues or few cells, and this is not enough. Yeah, for example, hormones, another type of message required that they come from one tissue, from the kidneys to the gut. So you need the interaction of few things. So remember, and that was just a very interesting video. And remember that what I wanted to show you with all these things about cloning is that unfortunately we don't have uh, in science, and it's more than say this is right and this is wrong. It's like we need to start thinking about how to regulate things and in which circumstances this is right and this is wrong, and that this is a complex problem that we will not solve easily. Okay, so now we're going to move to this to talk about a few questions of the test and a practice questions that we have.